Okay, we're looking back at the NASA Horizons database, and we did a query on the plane angle of Comet 21P Giacobini-Zinner with compared to the Earth. And you can see when the angle is in orange there, it's a very low number. It goes from negative 0.00114, and then it goes positive. That is where the Earth intersects the comet's plane angle. There's no angle. And so that happens on 2018, October 8 at 2300 hours, Universal Standard Time. Israel is 2 hours ahead of this, so it'll be 2400, 1 o'clock on the 9th instead of the 8th. It'll be at 1 o'clock early in the morning on the 9th is when the Earth will cross the plane angle, and that is when to expect the meteor storm. Notice also 2018, we talked about 1933 was Hitler, 1946 United Nations. In 2018, what other threatening anti-Jewish power can we expect except maybe the Antichrist? If we look at the star chart in 2018, on October the 8th, we're looking from Jerusalem, and we're looking at 7 in the evening. This is what they'll see. Now, when 1933 in Europe and also in 46 United States, when they saw the meteor storms, the dragon was real high in the sky, like about what you see now. Probably 1 hour later, it started about 8, last for 4 or 5. Both of them lasted about 4.5 to 5 hours long of meteor storm. It's going to be different this time in Israel because the plane angle it won't be crossed till around 1 in the morning. So it won't be so high in the sky like it was here in Europe. So you're not going to see the stars coming down upon you as much as you did in Europe. What's it going to look like? Let's go down to the time of 1 in the morning. Right there. That is where the dragon will be in 2018 on October the 9th and 1 in the morning when it crosses the plane angle. That's when to expect the meteor storm. It's very low in the sky. It's not high. So it's very reasonable. That's why John only saw 1/3 of the stars cast to the ground. It's so low. You're not going to fill. The sky is not going to be filled like it was in 1933. It's real low. So it makes perfect sense why he only saw 1/3. Also, he said the dragon's tail drew 1/3 of the stars. Well, let's see how his tail is even with the head. The storm is going to come from the head, and it's going to be seeming like it's coming from the tail too. And if we go backwards, look how the tail has curled around like it's scooping up the stars. Like it's scooping them up. And then you're going to see it coming from the head at 1 in the morning, Israeli time. So everything lines up perfect with what the Apostle John saw over 2,000 years ago. Amazing. This comet was not even in the dragon back then. Not till 1900. And guess what? Most likely we will not see any more meteor storms from this comet ever. Because in 2029, you can see from this image, it's going to pass very close to Jupiter. Jupiter is so massive, it is over twice the mass of all the other planets in the solar system combined. It has a lot of a gravitational pull, and you get this comet coming that close to Jupiter, it's going to severely change its orbit. So it's going to be a long time after this before the comet, it's going to actually push the comet away from the Earth further. And it's going to be a long time before we see any more meteor showers from the dragon. So this is it. This is the last one. Oh yeah, God could bring another comet into the dragon and we could have showers from it, but why does he need to do that when he's already got one? He's already got a comet in the dragon, and this comet has been symbolic of the Jews from its founding, from both meteor storms in the Feast of Sukkot, And now, in 2018, it's going to make 2 close approaches on Yom Teruah. And then it's going to have, a month later, it's going to have a meteor storm, just like the Apostle John talked about. There's no reason to think it's not going to be this comet that the Apostle John saw and was talking about. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. He stood before the woman. Look at what the constellations look like from just a perspective of every day, the rising and setting. The twisted serpent, his head is going to go above the gray area is the horizon. We're looking through the earth like it doesn't exist. This program allows you to do it. His head rose just as Virgo did. And then at sunset, you're seeing going right down, it just broke the horizon. Virgo is now below the horizon, although we're seeing through the earth and we're acting like we can still see. Look at the serpent pursuing the woman. So the motions is just like John described. We'll look at it another time. At sunrise, watch his head come exactly above the horizon. Just as Virgo's feet clear the horizon, so does the serpent's head. And then at sunset, he's hovering over her. So he stood before the woman. And you see the baby Jupiter right there, just been born. Virgo's going down below the horizon, and here the serpent is as he's closer now in the afternoon than he was in the morning, and he's pursuing after her. Exactly as Apostle John describes. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God in his throne. So now we have a change. He's talking about Jupiter. Jupiter represents the Messiah, Yeshua. He was born, he was caught up to the throne. But here John makes a very subtle change. We started out with Virgo representing Israel. Jupiter's the Messiah. But now he's going to keep following Jupiter, and this is the key. This is the thing that to understand Revelation 12 is he's following Jupiter. And now he starts to identify Jupiter with Israel. Well, how can he do that? Well, didn't Yeshua say, if you've done it to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it to me? He identifies with Israel. And so what happens to the Messiah, he says it happens to him. So it's this one and the same. So John is now going to start following Jupiter, and he's going to call her the woman. Even though we started out with Virgo as the woman, he's going to start identifying with the motions of Jupiter as the woman. And then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. He's looking forward, and we're going to follow Jupiter, and we'll see Jupiter will do exactly as John mentioned here. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail. Nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. We have a war here. And we're going to see that in the stars. We're going to watch where Saturn is at the beginning of Revelation chapter 12, when he sees the woman with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars. This is the exact same date, the 23rd of September, and instead of looking at the woman, we're looking at where Saturn is at. Saturn just happens to be in the Scorpion in Ophiuchus, the evil kingdom. Serpents and scorpions represent the power of the enemy. You have Saturn representing Satan, is in the power of the enemy. And not only that, you see he's on the dark horse. You can lightly see the dark horse nebula, and he's right there in his dark horse, seated in authority. The horse is like a power and authority. He's seated in authority in his evil kingdom, right when the same time that John starts Revelation chapter 12. So we're going to follow Saturn now. And instead of following the woman, Virgo, we're going to see what happened to Saturn from this very time. So he's positioned in a high, and sitting pretty at this point. If we look at his ring opening, this data query from the SETI Institute shows you the ring angle of Saturn. Every 15 years, it goes from positive, basically 27 degrees, to 27 degrees the other direction. So it's a 30-year orbit of Saturn. So every 15 years, he's showing the northern hemisphere. 15 years later, he's showing the southern hemisphere. And his rings are at the maximum angle. If you look at this, just 3 weeks, this is 2017, this is just 3 weeks after John starts talking about the woman Virgo. His ring opening is at the maximum for 6 days. 26.966 degrees. That's the maximum. Then you see it starts to go lower. So Saturn is sitting there. Not only is he sitting on his dark horse, but he's showing off. Because when that ring angle is at a maximum, he's like a cock strutting around for a fight. Because he looks the biggest, he looks the brightest, he's all puffed up. That ring angle is at a maximum. And this is only 3 weeks after this whole discourse starts in Revelation 12. So why is this important? This is a picture showing Saturn at an angle, showing its southern hemisphere. But he won't be showing his southern hemisphere in 2017. He'll be tilting, showing his northern hemisphere, and that is hallmark of his beauty, that that hexagon on his North Pole that he's so proud of. He's going to be showing that off. And he's going to have his rings at the maximum angle, showing the north side. So he's strutting around in his dark horse, showing off. And then look what happens now as we'll watch Mercury come down and fight with Saturn. Here Mercury comes down, makes a sweep right there. I mean, how else would you show a fight with the stars? And then he comes down and makes a second punch. Saturn started out in the dark horse, which was in the right leg of Ophiuchus. You can see where he started. Look where he ended. After the fight was over, he's in Sagittarius, the centaur with the bow. That represents the battlefield. He's in another constellation now. He's out of that evil kingdom, and now he's on the battlefield. Let's look at it again. Watch Mercury come down. Take a swipe at him, fight him. See, he's leaving the dark horse. He's retreating. Mercury comes back around, full speed, makes a final punch. And now he's knocked into the battlefield. He's cast to the earth. Perfect example of what Revelation describes. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child." So now John is going to talk about he persecuted the woman. He's going to identify Jupiter with the woman now. Okay? So let's watch what happens. We're going to back up and see Mercury coming down, making its final punch on Saturn at the bottom of the screen. And at the top you see Jupiter is in Libra, and there's Mars. Mars means war. So as soon as Mars is going to collide with Jupiter. You're going to see Mercury doing his final fight with Saturn. So it's a fight. It's a fight against the Messiah. It's a fight against Israel. And so we're going to start from this final punch that we just saw, and then we're going to watch Mars. So Mars approaches Jupiter, and Mercury's finishing the fight with Saturn. There's the collision, Mars with Jupiter. Mercury's finishing the final blow on Saturn, knocks him out of his kingdom. Now watch Mars. The planets are on the regular progression from the right to the left. They're traveling, but watch what happens when Mars pulls even with Saturn. Saturn is right over the Centaur, Sagittarius' head. Right there, watch what happens. Jupiter stops. Now Saturn stops. Now Jupiter retreats. As soon as Mars comes even with Saturn, he stops. He goes irate. And now he begins to pursue Jupiter. They're both doing the retrograde motion now. Okay, notice Saturn is at the Centaur's head. But now he's going to go back like he's trying to get back into his evil kingdom. Saturn's migrating towards the bow of Centaur now. Jupiter's at the far as he can go, almost out of Libra. Jupiter has to now start going back in a forward motion. Saturn is as far as he can go now, and he has to halt his pursuit. He is not permitted to re-enter that kingdom. He's been cast out. He's on the battlefield and he can't get back in his kingdom. He's right at the edge of Sagittarius. That's as far as he can get. He can't pursue Jupiter any further. He tried. And so he sits there. He sits there for a month and just he's motionless until his motion takes back over to the normal pattern. And so while he sits there, at the end of 1 month, guess what? You've got the Draconid meteor storm, October 9th, that we just saw, 2018, where 1/3 of the stars are cast to the earth. So you've got about 9-month period from when he's cast into Sagittarius to when you see the dragon cast in the stars, 1/3 to the earth. But there you see Saturn pursuing the woman, represented by Jupiter. The next, we're going to follow Jupiter now. This is the whole key to Revelation 12, is John is following Jupiter and interpreting what he's seeing and the images and what's happening to Jupiter he's describing. Now this part is not really described by John, but it's what happens next. Jupiter is in the Libra constellation. Its future's in the balance. It's being persecuted by Saturn, Satan. Jupiter is representing Israel. Mercury is now going to escort Jupiter into the dark kingdom. This is a dangerous area to enter. It's a power of the enemy. You see, you got the Ophiuchus, you got the serpent handler. You see his serpent he's holding. There's serpents. You got the scorpion. You got the dark horse, the dark river. All of this is in this constellation, the power of the enemy. So Israel's going into bad territory. But Mercury, representing the angels of God, is going to protect him. And watch how Mercury, side by side, is going to escort Jupiter into the dangerous dark kingdom. He goes ahead of Jupiter, clears the way, comes back, circles behind, guards him from behind as he enters, and then he goes back out in front of him. Just give him protective cover as Jupiter enters the scorpion. So an interesting analogy that John doesn't talk about, but you see the protection of Israel by the angels of God, even though Israel's being persecuted. Okay, Jupiter has continued to go into the dark kingdom. It goes up through the Dark Horse Nebula, then it stops, and it starts to get into its retrograde motion. And it's beginning to go back down. And on the eve of Passover, it's about to enter the Dark Horse. And you can lightly see the Dark Horse right there. on Passover, Jupiter will enter the dark horse. And there's the calendar, 2019, 14th of Nisan, the first day of Passover. Isn't that interesting? Jupiter enters the dark horse. Not good. This is 6 months after the Draconoid meteor storm, where 1/3 of the stars are cast. That represents the rise of anti-Jewish power. Could this be the rise of the Antichrist? Let's look. In the middle of the Passover week, look what joins Jupiter in the dark horse. This is only 4 days later. So not only is Jupiter in the dark horse, he's joined by the moon. What's the significance of seeing Jupiter and the moon? You have a moon and a star. Doesn't that look familiar? What do we know about moons and stars? It's a modern symbol for Islam. Here we have 7 nations, different sovereign nations, yet they all got the same symbol on their flags. Why? They're all Islamic. The star and the moon is an interesting symbol, and we just have that in a dark horse in the middle of the Passover, the 4th day of Passover. We look on the Jewish calendar. Here it is, the 23rd, Matzah, the 4th day. Why is that important? Look what Daniel said. And he shall confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week. And in the middle of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the offering to cease. And on a corner of the altar, desolating abominations. The middle of the week. There's 2 meanings to that. It's the middle of a 7-year period, but it's also the middle of the Passover week. Here we have the 23rd. He entered the dark horse on the 19th, and now here, the 23rd, the 4th day of the 7 days of unleavened bread, marked in red there. That's when the moon joined Jupiter in the dark horse. What else? How else would you symbolize an Islamic Antichrist? Right there. And this date, what's significant about this date also, it fits perfectly on the Hebrew calendar for 1,260 days from this day to the day before Yom Kippur. And we know that he has 1,260 days. It fits. So this date not only fits on the calendar, it fits in what we're seeing in the heavens. What happens next? Jupiter begins a 95-day drift down the dark river. He's helpless. Israel is helpless. They're under the power of the enemy, the Antichrist. Can't do anything. So it's still going down the retrograde motion. But watch what Jupiter does. It's not easy to see the dark river. You can barely see it, but try to notice it. It is following exactly the dark river. It's like it's drifting down the dark river. What are the chances that its retrograde motion would line up perfect with the dark river nebula? That is astronomical. It's just another sign that's happening. It's lining up perfectly. All of these signs are perfectly aligned. So watch Jupiter go right down the dark river. It's going to be right down the very middle of the river, symbolizing under the power of the enemy. Now we're going to see this picture flip around in different angles because it's taking a snapshot every week, and it's at 24-hour periods, and the constellations are moving around, so that's why we're seeing it upside down here. But see, it's right down the dark river, and now it's starting to swim back up, and he's back in the dark horse where he started. Finally, Jupiter gets back past the dark horse. Right here, he's right on the dark horse, because that's right in the right leg of Ophiuchus. Now Jupiter's going to leave the kingdom of darkness. Thank God. Okay, where's he going to go, though? He's going to go into the battlefield. Not good. So we're going to watch what happens to Jupiter. And we're going forward 1 week at a time, 7 days. And we're just watching Jupiter. He's going into the battlefield. It looks good, but as soon as it enters, watch what happens. You have a solar eclipse right there, greeting him. Not a good sign. Saturn's waiting. Mercury has some temporary relief, but Mercury goes on by. It looks like Israel's going to be on their own to fight. Saturn's sitting there just waiting. Now watch, the evil planet appears. Mars. Remember what happened before. Mars, when it pulled even with Saturn, Saturn went berserk and started pursuing Jupiter. Let's see what happens. As soon as he does it again. He stops. And now they face off for 50 days. Jupiter stops. As soon as Mars pull even with Saturn, he stops his forward progression, and now they're entering into a retrograde motion phase. Now they're both going in the retrograde motion. That represents Saturn pursuing Jupiter. And now you can see he's going back down into Sagittarius. It looked like Jupiter might get out of the battlefield, but now he's being chased back onto the battlefield. Now the retrograde motion stops. They're going to have to go forward. Jupiter's going to be forced to confront Saturn. And Saturn is just waiting. Jupiter's motion is faster than Saturn's. Saturn's orbit is twice as far from the Sun because he's twice as far from the glory. So Jupiter is going to catch up with Saturn. There's nothing Israel can do. It's going to be a confrontation. And there you have it, the clash on the 21st of December in 2020. It's called the Great Conjunction. This happens once every 20 years. And every 20 years, it's like 60 degrees further in the sky, or 120 degrees further. So it'll be 60 more years before Saturn and Jupiter ever clash in this region of the sky again. This is just another sign that's happening in the right place. It'll be 60 more years before they'll clash anywhere near this area. All of these are lining perfectly together. So there's going to be some major confrontation with Israel somewhere around the 21st of December 2020.